When I inherited the land, I thought I was inheriting peace. 120 acres of wild, quiet Georgia timberland. It stretched from the base of a pine-crested ridge all the way down to the Cusawati River just north of Jasper. It had been in my Uncle Raymond's name since long before I was born, and when he passed last fall, no spouse, no kids, it passed to me, like a forgotten heirloom sealed in tree bark. All I could think was freedom. No more zoning code meetings, no more overpriced HOA consultations. I left Atlanta for good, closed my office, sold the condo, and packed up my life into a truck. Goodbye, concrete. Hello, pine needles and sawdust. Raymond's old house sat like a crow's nest near one edge of the ridge. Half-rotten siding, porch steps that groaned under their own weight, and a moss-choked roof. Looked like it hadn't had working heat since Eisenhower was president. But the bones didn't lie, and the view didn't disappoint. I spent 3 cold months breathing life back into that place, ripping out wallpaper that smelled like pipe smoke and mildew, jacking up sagging joists, replacing windows that had been more glass-flavored wind tunnels than anything else. No contractors, just me, some gloves, a second-hand shop vac, and the constant ache of purposeful work. And man, it felt good. I had plans for the property, too. A rustic boat dock where I could fish the Cusawati at dawn. Maybe a screened-in porch with rocking chairs and bourbon sunsets. I even sketched out a garden near the base of the hill. The land was big, old, patient. It deserved attention. But I'd avoided the riverbend since late January. Between the thaw and spring runoff, the lower clearing was a mud pit, half marsh, half mosquito sanctuary. When I finally did make the hike down, a few weeks into April, I carried a mug of black coffee and the naive optimism of someone who thinks back to nature is always poetic. It turned out to be something else entirely. From the moment my boots sank into the soft peat near the sloping tree line, something felt off. The logs and brush at river's edge had shifted, and so had the river itself. Not much, maybe 20-25 feet, but downstream curves do that sometimes. The floodplain morphed slightly, revealing a wide, flat section freshly cleared of debris. At first, I admired it. A natural platform, almost perfect for that boat dock. Then I saw the tire tracks. Deep, heavy, twin-rear tread. Work truck maybe too, definitely not ATV. I followed the ruts, confused more than anything. Tracks led straight into that new flat patch, now firm and dry, and what I found sitting there stopped me cold. A shed. Not the rickety, clapboard kind Uncle Ray might have slapped together years ago. No, this sucker was brand new. Light gray steel siding with taupe-colored faux wood panels. One of those factory-assembled numbers, square edges, cold beauty, sitting on a poured concrete slab like something you'd find in the suburbs. Hell, like something from the Riverview Crossings HOA up the hill. I didn't build that, and no one told me they were going to. I stood there for a good 5 minutes wondering if I'd had a stroke or was somehow standing on someone else's land. But that was impossible. I knew this acreage inside out. The survey stakes still had peeling orange ribbons attached. This was mine. I circled it, brand new padlock on the door. Concrete still looked fresh. Grass beside the platform had been roll-laid recently, soil underneath still wobbling like pudding. Someone had just been here. And they hadn't just shown up uninvited. They made themselves at home. At this point, I was somewhere between confused and violated. Because this wasn't a mistake. I've been an architect for 20 years. I've dealt with bureaucracies, rezoning nightmares, and every kind of contractor manipulation. This shed. It was strategic, clean, intentional. Which made it worse. I went back up the hill with fire in my gut, fetched my drill, and marched all the way back. I wasn't going to break the lock, no, I wanted cleaner evidence than that. I unscrewed the hinges. Loud, borderline petty, but when someone builds on your land without asking, you don't send them an RSVP. Inside, the smell hit first. Stale insulation, plastic boxes packed tight, stacked like miniature skyscrapers. Labels scrawled in bold blue marker. Unit 2, Christmas Keep, "Do not toss, Karen's office." And then there it was. An old, yellowing refrigerator in the back corner, plastered with a peeling sticker. RVC HOA/property of Riverview Crossings. I felt my blood pressure tick up 10 points. There were deck chairs, a busted snowman inflatables kit, cracked wreaths, someone's old paper shredder. It's like they took the worst parts of their suburban garage and decided my riverside view was the new landfill. I didn't touch a single thing. I took mental stock, documented every detail. Then I locked it again, not to protect it, but to preserve it. Evidence doesn't take sides. Back inside the house, I popped open a beer and started a list. 5 names made the first cut, but only one went at the top. Karen Coington. That night, I didn't sleep much. It wasn't just about the shed. It wasn't even about the junk inside. It was the way it all felt, deliberate, dismissive, administrative. The HOA up the hill liked to play sheriff in a town they didn't own. And something told me they thought no one would care. That the guy who inherited 120 acres would stay quiet, drink his coffee, and do nothing. Well, they'd picked the wrong landowner. The next morning, I made my first call. Some mornings, black coffee just isn't strong enough. That morning, I needed something more potent, like a legal Molotov cocktail. After barely sleeping a wink, I was up with the sun, pacing my kitchen with the mental image of that shed tattooed onto the insides of my eyelids. 120 acres of private land. Mine. And some suburban bureaucrat with a taste for taupe-colored siding thought they could carve off a piece without so much as sending a damn email. It wasn't just trespass, it was arrogance, and I had a prime suspect. Karen Coington, Queen Bee of Riverview Crossings. I'd never met her, but I'd heard enough stories to sketch a character profile worthy of a courtroom drama. Part bulldozer, part dry-cleaned menace. The kind of person who smiled while serving subpoenas and called it community stewardship. So I made the call. I wasn't angry, not yet, just curious. Curious to see how far someone like Karen would go before admitting they'd messed up. After being transferred through 3 HOA departments, I didn't realize that many even existed, and surviving 10 minutes of tortured acoustic covers of Bon Jovi, she answered. Riverview Crossings Homeowners Association, this is Karen. Her voice was exactly what I expected, chirpy, efficient, and razor-bladed underneath. If passive aggression had a ringtone, it would be her holding music. Hi Karen, this is Reed Garland. I own the land directly south of your development. I'm calling in regard to a shed that's been built on my property. There was a pause, not long but loaded, calculative. Oh, that, she said, as if I'd asked about a missing recycle bin. Yes, that's one of our temporary community storage units. It's part of a riverside beautification initiative. Beautification. It took everything in me not to laugh. Concrete and corrugated metal didn't exactly say, charming riverfront. That land is private. I inherited it from my uncle last year. There's been no lease, no agreement, no contact. With all due respect, Mr. Garland, she said, her tone intensifying like black tea left to steep too long. That area has not been maintained in decades. It appeared to be community land. No signage, no fence, no use. It presented a liability. Ah, the old, you didn't put a fence up, so now it's ours defense. How convenient. You're telling me you built a secured storage unit on land you don't own, because it looked available. Don't be dramatic. The unit is temporary and well within our rights under a temporary utility landscape use clause filed with county records. Now that, I knew, was total BS. Zoning laws don't just let you install structures based on vibes. And your clause includes pouring concrete on someone else's property, I asked. Well, that slab was to ensure the unit didn't collect moisture. Karen, you trespassed, you poured concrete. You dropped off HOA junk like you were hijacking a landfill. That's not community improvement. That's theft. She gave this little hum of a laugh, the kind that made drywall peel in horror. Perhaps once you've calmed down, we can reach a mutual resolution. Until then, Mr. Garland, I suggest you review our guidelines. We've dealt with land misunderstandings before. Kindly remember that your land borders a community with very clear expectations about preservation. Translation, we make the rules. You inherited dirt and trees. You should be grateful we're even using it. I hung up. Not out of rage, out of finality. That conversation wasn't going to solve anything. That woman didn't have a shred of remorse, let alone legality. And in my gut, I knew. This wasn't her first unauthorized beautification. That afternoon, I returned to the shed. Camera in hand, voice recorder clipped to my jacket. The concrete still gleamed. Tires still marked the earth like signatures of guilt. I snapped photos from every angle. The boxes, the dirty leaf blower, the faux wood trim trying desperately to appear rustic. That shed wasn't storage. It was a drop site, a private dump masquerading as civic virtue. As I scanned the interior again, I caught sight of something new. Folders labeled clearly in ballpoint pen. RVC Budget 2022. Vendor Receipts Do Not Share. HOA Personnel Reviews Draft. A cold knot formed in my chest. They weren't just trespassing. They were treating my land like a filing cabinet of dirty secrets. Daylight faded, but I stayed long enough to document everything. By nightfall, I had organized a digital folder on my desktop labeled Shedgate. Inside it, 37 photographs, 2 screen recordings of the HOA website, showing no trace of a beautification initiative. Voice memos of my call with Karen. GPS drop pins. A GoPro body cam pass of the entire interior. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing for war. The next morning, I took the evidence and marched down to the county land records office. The kind of building where time moves slowly and everything smells faintly of copy paper and petty disputes. The front clerk was a thin man in a sweater vest who looked exactly like someone who took suspicious joy in correcting forms. I handed him the parcel and asked, "Hey, can you show me any permits filed for a structure on the riverbank just south of Riverview Crossings?" He blinked slowly, typed even slower. "Only one permit application in the past 6 months. And denied. Denied by who? Submitted by someone named Travis Cowington. Denied for improper area designation and failure to notify neighboring landowners." Of course, Travis, the paper trail prince, Karen's nephew if I had to guess. That was when the pattern came into focus. Nepotism-handled contracts, verbal initiatives never written down, paperwork bulleted into silence. Back outside, I sat in the truck's cab with the heating humming and scribbled the name. TC Civic Works, investigate next. Because if this was their version of county legal, it was duct-taped fiction. I made one final stop that day. Dennis Harlan, local surveyor. We decrossed paths on a Blue Ridge portfolio job years back. He was blunt, sunburned, and wielded surveying tech like it came from Area 51. "Tell me where this shed sits, Dennis," I said. "Where on the lines?" "Right on my rage," I replied. 3 hours later, after GPS mapping, drone footage, topo grid overlays, and 1,000 sarcastic pings from Dennis's tracker. "We had it. 91 feet. That's how far the shed sat inside my property. Not near the line, not brushing it. Planted, anchored, brazen. To top it off, the entire area had been improved at the cost of freshly crushed foliage, poured cement into soft soil, and based on Dennis's drone photos, exhaust trail leading from a private HOA road. That night I called Lou Benson, my land lawyer, half Southern charm, half legal thermite. "Lou," I said, "I've got a digital folder that's about to explode." He chuckled, "How bad is it?" When I say trespassing misuse of private land with possible corporate fraud icing, does that help? I sent him the files, permit denial, survey data, photos, transcripts. By the time Lou called back, I already had a motion draft sitting on my desk. You're sitting on a righteous complaint, read. Want to press charges? Not yet. Why? I sipped my beer and smiled. I want to see how deep the rot really goes first. The sun was barely up, but I'd already swiped through every file in the Shedgate folder 3 times. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. A slip, a name, an overlooked date that didn't match up, something to turn suspicion into strategy, because this wasn't about junk storage anymore. They de-used my land, knowingly, as a low-rent archive for what could be inflating into actual fraud. And if Karen Coington thought she could get away with installing an off-grid HOA tax shelter on my property and blame it on community beautification, she was about to have a very ugly morning. But I wasn't about to go full vigilante, not yet. I was done playing defense. Now I'd start building the case. That day, I walked the slope to the river with a GoPro clipped to my chest, phone in my left pocket recording voice memos, because in stories like this, every detail matters. The shed hadn't changed, but the lock had. It was relatched but wrong, slightly loose, the alignment off by just enough to make my skin bristle. Someone had been inside after my last visit. Someone came back like they still owned the place. I reached for the thin lip of the padlock, lifted it. Opened easily. No alarm, no camera. This wasn't security-conscious illegal storage. This was arrogance masquerading as ownership. I pushed the door open. Inside, new boxes had been added. 2 full stacks lined the left wall. Cardboard file boxes. More plastic totes labeled archive. A folding table leaned under the weight of binders marked HOA Finance, Confidential, Vendor Budget 2022, and disturbingly specific things like spending freeze exceptions, Travis only. Now I wasn't just looking at holiday lights and wreaths. I was staring at the paper guts of a slush fund. They stored financial records on my land, probably because they thought no one came down this far, probably because they thought I'd never notice or care. Wrong on both counts. My fingers hovered over a box labeled Current Q4 Review Draft Only. Tempting, but I resisted. I'd filmed what mattered. Everything else would be handled soon by someone with latex gloves and a badge. I latched the door again, this time making sure it was exactly how I found it. Then I walked back up and added a new subfolder to Shedgate. File folder Accounting Evidence. Inside, 12 new photos of interior boxes. GPS stamp. GoPro video of my full entry and exit. Audio timestamp. My commentary noting box labels. This wasn't just building a case. It was setting a trap. Later that afternoon, an old pickup truck bounced down the gravel access trail near the slope. The tires skidded a little near the embankment, fresh weight, more delivery. I stood behind a tree and watched as a middle-aged man climbed out, clipboard in hand, and began to unload 4 boxes from the flatbed. I walked out with steady steps, not hostile, not smiling either. Afternoon, I called. He turned mid-lift, surprised. Oh, hey, you with the HOA. No, I said, stepping closer. I own this land, just wanted to ask what you're delivering. His face flipped between confusion and concern. Karen sent me, said this was a drop site for the Riverview HOA. I watched his eyes. He wasn't lying, just some grunt in the gears. She tell you this was HOA land? I asked. He nodded slowly. Said it was under easement or something, used for community purposes. She made it sound official. It's not, this is private land. That shed is illegally placed. And by the way, that concrete slab, that's on me to rip up, not the HOA. The man blinked, then frowned. Shit, I don't want any part of that. I just deliver this stuff. I don't even work for them. Got a call from an organization called TC Civic Works. Bingo. Do me a favor, I said. Drop your boxes, do your job, but look around. This is private property. I'm not blaming you, but your contact fed you bad info. Take that back to your dispatcher. He nodded, will do. As he drove off, I took photos of his truck, plate, contents of his drop-off, and timestamped the box labels. No hostility, no drama, just law and documentation. Like I said, I'm not paranoid. I'm prepared. By sundown, Shedgate had new residents. /deliveries/driver 1 truck ID, JPG. Surveillance internal drop log. /audio/Karen call mark up, VTT. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was trying to make the truth too complete to ignore. And the next move. The sheriff. 2 days later, a cruiser rolled into my driveway at 9:03 a.m. Almost early, angry, deliberate. Sheriff Randall McAdams stepped out with the kind of composure you don't earn, you inherit. Tidy mustache, tan jacket, ex-CPO posture that said, I don't lose arguments, I wait out lies. You the one who called about the shed? His baritone asked. That's me, I said, handing over a folder thicker than a training manual. He flipped through the info with quiet steadiness. County permit denial of construction. Surveyor's map showing the shed sitting 91 feet inside my property. Drone photos. Phone transcript from my call with Karen. Photos, labels, and hard drive access to the recorded footage. When he looked back up, he didn't say, wow. He said the one phrase that confirmed it all. Got a warrant to inspect. We rode down in his cruiser, crunching gravel like slow thunder. Every bump had more weight than the last. When we got to the shed, he stepped out slowly, adjusted his glasses, and knocked once on the metal panel. Predictably, no one answered. He pulled out a pair of bolt cutters and muttered, official business, before slicing clean through the lock like it owed him rent. Inside, McAdams moved slow, controlled, calculating. He whispered only 2 words, oh boy. He reached for a file box, flipped open the top. More ledgers, more vendor records, but this time installations with payment slips signed not just by HOA members, but by Karen herself. Looking resigned, disgusted, maybe both, McAdams radioed dispatch. Gonna need full evidence collection, secure site, catalog contents. Within an hour, 2 more cruisers arrived. Uniforms, labeled bags. Yellow evidence tape stretched from oak to pine. The shed was now officially an active legal scene. I stood there at the edge of the clearing thinking. This used to be a place for fly fishing. Now it was watching a regime collapse. Then came the Lexus. Silver, fast and furious, it screeched to a dusty halt at the top of the hill. Karen stormed out, flanked by 2 HOA board members, one carrying a clipboard, the other gripping a tablet like it might suddenly become a lawyer. Karen's heels stabbed into the earth like they were meant to rezone it. She strode toward the shed. This is a violation of community code, she spat at the deputy. McAdams didn't flinch. This is a county-authorized inspection of a structure erected without permit, on private land that isn't yours. Karen pointed a silver-dusted nail across the clearing. It was agreed to, with the prior caretaker, Mr. Garland's uncle. I stepped in. Raymond, he's been dead for 8 months and I'm the sole deed holder. She froze only briefly, then war-painted on a smile. We believed the land to be under informal community easement. In writing, McAdams asked. Karen bristled. Verbal agreement. Which isn't recognized, and you poured concrete, he said. Behind us, a deputy emerged with a locked safe and a fireproof file box. The other followed it with clear bags of records, binders, flash drives. Karen's board members visibly backed up a step. McAdams just nodded. "Yeah," he said, "this ain't a misunderstanding. This is a crime scene." By the time they loaded the last box into the sheriff's cruiser, Karen's designer sunglasses were fogging from more than just Georgia humidity. No dramatic arrests were made on the spot. Karen hissed about representation, legal protocol, and community priority clauses, none of which seemed to carry weight when you're standing next to a concrete slab built over a trespass claim backed by a permit denial, drone footage, and 37 labeled photographs. And the best part, I didn't have to yell, didn't threaten a lawsuit. I just stood back and let logic pick up a badge. Sheriff McAdams placed a sheriff's seal on the lockless shed before loading into his truck. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Garland," he said, already flipping through his phone. "This isn't going to end with some storage squabble. This goes deeper than lawn chairs." I had a feeling he was right. By midweek, news began seeping into Riverview crossings like runoff into cracked pavement. Not official word, not yet, but people talk. Employees of employees, contractors, neighbors, that HOA storage shed. The one everyone thought was just another overreach from Karen's perfectly manicured empire. Well, turns out it was housing a financial Chernobyl. I got the first real update from Lou, my attorney. He called just after I'd restacked the last pile of split logs outside the house. "Reed, hope you're sitting down." "I'm always sitting, unless I'm angry or sanding a floor." "Fair. Well, turns out your little shed is the Bermuda Triangle of misplaced ethics. What they'd pulled from that metal box last week wasn't just impound material. It was a map. A paper trail of fraud, sketched in contractor invoices, backdated receipts, shady payroll entries, and emails printed and circled in aggressive red ink. Here's what Lou laid out over the phone. One, nearly $30,000 in withdrawals marked as Community Refreshment Fund, all in cash, spread over 18 months. 2, fake maintenance charges for sidewalk repairs that never happened. 3, payments to a vendor listed as TC Civic Works, a company that, surprise, was registered under one Travis Coington, Karen's nephew. 4, multiple duplicate vendor payments with identical EINs under different names. 5, a voice memo stored on a USB drive recovered from the file box in the shed. In it, Karen reportedly says, "If the board ever demands an audit, we're all screwed." Reenacted dramatically and poorly, according to McAdams. I didn't even know where to start laughing. It wasn't just shady, it was boldly corrupt. Karen had turned the HOA into a personal piggy bank, padding landscaping contracts, issuing emergency budgets with no oversight, and apparently stashing the most incriminating paper trail somewhere she thought no one would ever look. On the wrong man's property. And the county. They weren't laughing. It didn't take long for the prosecutor's office to open a case. The documents recovered, now cataloged in binders, boxes, and hard drives, all pointed back to the same handful of community initiatives, most of which had no real outcomes. No public bids. No completion documentation. Just invoices paid to Travis, LLC, marked expedited or board approved with no actual vote records. If that were the end of it, Karen might have limped out with a fine and a pink slip. But Riverview Crossings had a secret weapon Karen didn't see coming. Suburban mutiny. That's the thing with elegant neighborhoods. Everything looks civil, tulip beds, bird feeders, little free libraries. But underneath the mulch, people hold grudges like keepsakes. And when word got out, they came for Karen like ants on honey-glazed hypocrisy. I didn't even have to speak at the first emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited anyway. But one of the members, Rick Henley, a landscape guy I once saw mowing the median in a three-piece suit, called me from the parking lot afterward. "Woo boy," he said, almost cheerful. She tried to pin it on you. Let me guess, I sighed. I'm the anti-community loner hoarding riverside acreage for chaos. Not far off. Claimed the structure was actively in transfer to a permanent site and that you had ambushed her. That drew a full laugh from me. Ambushed with paperwork and a tape measure. Rick didn't even chuckle. Room didn't buy it, then someone brought up the sidewalk repair duplicates. Guess who signed both payments? I didn't need to guess. That's when at Gmail.com folders started leaking into the HOA Facebook group. Someone had screenshotted internal emails, complete with signature blocks, time-stamped attachments, and reminder to remove Travis name from invoice field before final print. Oops. Within 48 hours, 2 board members resigned. An anonymous source dumped a PDF labeled Karen Budget Spreadsheet Final Reel, XLS, into a parent chat. And a former treasurer, Linda, Karen's old right hand, flipped like a pancake at brunch and began cooperating with investigators. Karen's silence turned to desperation. She emailed residents herself, claimed she was being targeted by people unfamiliar with the complexities of neighborhood governance. She even accused Sheriff McAdams of using the raid for political theater, and for some reason threw in that my lawyer once parked illegally at the town's CVS. He did, for 5 minutes, no ticket. It was getting ridiculous. Not just wrong, but tragicomic. Soon after, the Riverview HOA's bank account was frozen. Travis Coington's business license got suspended pending administrative review, which is bureaucrat code for your goose is cooked. Gossip hit local radio. A regional consumer watchdog site picked up the story, and before sunset one Friday, I opened my laptop and saw a news ticker on the homepage of a mid-tier cable channel that read, HOA president under investigation for community fraud. I leaned back on my porch and cracked open a fresh beer. Karen had always preached order, compliance, and collective responsibility. But her whole empire was built on lies, and the lie was collapsing like a stucco facade in a hurricane. Inside the shed-turned evidence vault that still sat taped off at the edge of my meadow, every signature told the same tale. Karen Coington wasn't just a control freak. She was a thief wearing pearls. At sunset, the river glimmered behind me, smelling of fish and old pine. The air felt lighter now. No more trucks, no new locks, just wind in the oaks and the first whispers from townsfolk who used to lace their emails with kindly inform, and were now sharpening their pitchforks with PDF evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Not out of tension, not from anger, but because justice was waking up, stretching its shoulders and knocking on HOA doors. And in my dreams, Karen's shed didn't hold garbage anymore. It held reckoning. The shed was officially mine. Not in the it's on my land so it's mine by default sort of way. No. This was court-certified, judgment-ruled, irrevocably transferred legal ownership of what was once Riverview Crossings, HOA's crown jewel of shady storage. And that made it sweeter than bourbon on a screened-in porch at sunset. The judge declared it as part of a property restoration order, not just to return control to me, but to make a statement. Along with that came a ruling that the HOA now owed me $92,000 in damages, legal fees for property devaluation and enforcement, and long-term injunctive relief barring them from ever stepping foot on my land again, without written consent. The ruling read like poetry, typed in court-issued Helvetica. When the final gavel came down, Karen Coington didn't even flinch. She just sat there, lips pressed as tightly as the buttons on that stiff navy pantsuit, while her lawyer furiously scribbled what I could only assume was a list of last-ditch appeals that would go exactly nowhere. I walked out of that courthouse wearing the same flannel shirt I had on the first day I found the shed. Not a power move, just a reminder. I wasn't in it for revenge. I was in it to win on truth. Rebuilding the shed was my next mission, not because I wanted to erase what happened, but because I wanted to transform it. The county let me keep the original frame structure, though Dennis the surveyor jokingly offered to help demolish it ceremonially with a sledgehammer. Instead, I stripped the siding, reinforced the bones, and began converting it with cedar wood and reclaimed pine from an old barn upstate. Within 3 weekends, the inside was fully insulated and electrically wired. I added a workbench, too, smack in the middle, where I could finally tinker and design again. It wasn't just becoming a shed, it was a monument. On the front wall, right above the door, I hung a handcrafted sign. Built by Karen, seized by Reed, now a shed forever a warning. Locals loved it. Some came by just to take pictures. They weren't gawking, they were appreciating a symbol. It had become legendary, even got a nickname. Karen's Folly still makes me laugh every time I hear it. Meanwhile, things in Riverview Crossings were unraveling faster than a polyester flag in a hurricane. The board was gutted. 4 out of 5 members resigned. The only one who stayed on did so to help initiate independent audits, install a new voting system for budget approval, and enforce term limits. Imagine that, a once rigid HOA suddenly democratic. A few residents even stopped by with baked goods and thanks. One actually handed me warm banana bread and said, "We didn't vote for this circus. Thanks for turning the lights on." Lou, my attorney, was practically giddy. "You know," he said over lunch one afternoon, "we could push for personal litigation. Karen's fraud affected over 100 homeowners." I shook my head. Let the neighborhood handle their queen. I've got a dock to build. Besides, Karen had much bigger problems to worry about now. When her criminal trial began that fall, I showed up. Not because I had to. My affidavit and documents were already entered into record, but because I wanted to see the whole story reach its most poetic conclusion. Let the record show, the courtroom was silent but charged. Like someone had plugged a wire into the floor. Karen sat at the defense table, thinner now, brittle around the eyes. The navy pantsuit again, but this one sagged on her frame, like her authority had finally caught up with her conscience and left the building. The prosecutor laid everything out like a well-written checkbook. Embezzlement, criminal trespass, conspiracy to falsify legal records, unauthorized construction, forgery, fraud by misrepresentation. Each charge came with exhibit tags, paper records, testimony from former board members, expert reviews from forensic accountants, and most damningly, a copy of the permit denial application with Travis Coington's signature front and center. The cherry on top, Linda, her ex-treasurer and former friend, read a statement that included the words. She told us no one would check the invoices. She said, quote, "We've got the trust, so we buy the silence." I stayed quiet. I regret that now. The judge didn't raise an eyebrow throughout. Just nodded, then ruled. Karen was remanded for sentencing and faced up to 12 years in state prison, with asset forfeiture proceedings still pending. As she was escorted out, she turned her head once. No anger, no apology. Just a look of someone who'd been caught red-handed, but still didn't believe the hand was hers. That was the last time I saw her. 6 months passed slowly, like they always do in the South, thick with humidity, gnats, and small-town gossip. Karen's case made a short-lived national round. A segment on Channel 11 called Power Plays in the Suburbs featured footage of McAdams outside the shed. There was B-roll of the river, even one blurry clip of me, shotgun in the background, holding a caulk gun like a small-town vigilante. CNN called me a week later. I didn't respond. I wasn't looking to go viral. The story had ended exactly where it should have, in a courtroom, not a clickbait article. The shed stood quiet again at the river's edge, now tidy, cedar-wrapped, and alive with purpose. Inside, my tools hung neatly beneath soft Edison bulbs. One shelf held a framed copy of the ruling with the county's official seal. Above that, a laminated HOA flyer I'd found wadded in one of the original boxes. It read, "Community first. Individualism is the enemy of order." I crossed out the entire line with black Sharpie. Underneath it, I scrawled, "Not on my damn property." I walk past it every day before I start projects. It reminds me not to let systems think for me, not to accept someone else's version of order when it's built on lies. When the first fish flopped in the pond beneath the new dock a month later, I raised a glass of bourbon to the fading sun and muttered, "Here est to hell no, and here est to shed yes." The birds didn't care, neither did the breeze. But I knew what the land was telling me. That peace isn't something you inherit. It's something you defend. Epilogue. Property line. Karen went to trial, got convicted on 3 counts, pled out on the rest. She'll be away for a while, her nephew Travis, still claiming he's being scapegoated for family loyalty. His LLC was dissolved. Riverview got a new board, actually holds public votes now. Rumor is they might even dissolve the HOA completely and go voluntary. Either way, they don't send newsletters to my mailbox anymore, and that's just how I like it. I never wanted to be a hero of anything. I just wanted sunset coffee, river wind, and the smell of wood shavings in a warm shop. Now I've got that, and a legendary shed to prove it.